Vini Jr. He's 24. He likes to sing. He doesn't like to do rainbow flicks, but he does have himself a new documentary. That's thanks to a 100-minute special that Netflix put out, and it's called Balon. It does usual documentary things, asking journalists, childhood friends, teammates, and family members exactly what makes Vini Jr. Vini Jr. Covering his early life, his time at Flamengo, Real Madrid, Champions League title runs, the World Cup of 2022, and crucially a massive topic that's followed Vini Jr. through his recent career, and that's racism. It aired this week, and honestly, given some of the ratings I'd seen so far, I thought it could potentially be the first documentary to actually have a negative score, and because of that, I've watched it so you guys don't have to. Next up, big special video, me on Netflix. Get me. We're talking about patellas, ACLs, MCLs, the whole knee bone. To be honest, the story of me and my knee could be a movie. You know what? 7,000 likes on this video will do something foolish. I'll react to every single time a footballer's ever been in a film if this video gets to 7,000 likes. And of course, as I mentioned, at 750,000 subscribers, we're fast approaching. Thank you guys for all the support. I'll be testing out my knee for a real life football video. So make sure to press that button underneath the video. It massively helps me out. But today we're not talking about movies, we're talking about documentaries, and Vini Jr.'s specifically. Now this one was announced a long time ago, and a lot of the filming done in this documentary and some of the stuff that you see proves that it's been a long time in the works, which actually kind of made me more surprised, if I'm honest with you, because I feel like a lot of the things that have happened that have been massive in Vini Jr.'s career have really only developed over the last 3 years. At the end of the day, he is 24. He's absolutely class, but does he really need a documentary? That's not even a loaded question. That's the question we're going to be answering in this one. As I said, this has the worst rating maybe of any piece of media ever created, and that is truly something when the Big Bang Theory exists. Barcelona fans were rushing to their laptops to give this a -38 review over on Yelp. And going into it, I was expecting, you know, quite a few topics to be discussed. Obviously, you know, Real Madrid have won quite a lot of things over the last 3 years, couple of Champions League titles. Had to skip ahead for that one against Liverpool, I can't lie. Otherwise, there'd have been some serious depression. One thing that I was expecting was a segment about the Balon d'Or and the fact that he almost won it last year. Vini himself would have been left a little bit depressed when the editing team showed him that segment of the doc. Meanwhile, Rodri will have been at home chuckling, watching on with 0.7 of an E. But spoiler alert, it's not really mentioned at all, which I found quite confusing. I don't know if they'd finished filming by that point. In fairness, not that much from like the last year is featured. It's really stuff between predominantly 2021 and 2024, with obviously then stuff from his childhood and his time at Flamengo kind of interspersed in there as well. But given this was like a pretty pivotal moment in Vini Jr.'s career, not like forever, but like it's the first time he's gone and actually had a chance of winning the Balon d'Or, plus all the backlash that came from it, like Real Madrid not turning up for the ceremony, the banners at the Manchester City game, just everything that really came out from that, I think would have been really interesting to actually cover in the documentary. I mean, I for one didn't mind the fact that Rodri won the Balon d'Or. I think it's more telling of where football was at that moment than a defensive midfielder who, in fairness, had won the Euros and won pretty much everything with Man City, was to win it instead of, you know, a more exciting player like a Messi or Ronaldo that we've seen over the last decade. Maybe it was intentional from Vini's Netflix team. Either way, Rio Ferdinand will have been left fuming. Balon d'Or! Balon d'Or! So for this documentary, in the opening scenes, we went all the way back to the start of his time at Real Madrid. Yeah, no, we kind of forgot about all the Brazilian stuff. One thing I'm going to say off the rip, yeah, is I thought this documentary was organized very weirdly. I'm not someone who needs everything to be in chronological order. Like some Netflix shows are absolutely fine, or some documentaries are absolutely calm with telling a story in a completely different order. But we kind of found ourselves bouncing back and forth between stuff that happened when he was a child in Brazil and like early on in his Real Madrid career that don't need to be in different orders, or that don't need to be in the order that they are. It's a little bit nitpicky. We did get kind of like an overview of how difficult his start to life at Real Madrid was. You know, pundits and, you know, Real Madrid fans weren't too pleased with him after his £35 million move from Flamengo, which at the time was a record-breaking deal for a Brazilian under-18 that would later be smashed by Endrick from Palmeiras. But it was a lot of money, and obviously I think sometimes people forget just how early Real Madrid actually signed Vini. That deal was agreed like 2 weeks after he made his Flamengo debut, and he was still just 16. He obviously had to wait till he was 18 to sign. And the pressure was enormous straight off the bat. Real Madrid weren't in the greatest spot, wide men related. You had walking A&E department Eden Hazard trying to hold down the left wing, and he could barely hold his left ankle down, let alone hold down a position. So Vini did find himself getting opportunities pretty early, and he was kind of lambasted because of the fact that he found it difficult to adapt to, you know, European football. It's something I've spoken about a little bit in more detail in a video that you can check out here, and how Brazilian youngsters do need that integration period because of how free-flowing, you know, Brazilian football is, but in comparison, you don't have time to breathe in Europe. Everything's so tactical. And just when he got himself into the team, he found himself getting injured for 2 months. It showed a lot of his recovery, which I thought was really cool. It showed like the actual difficulties of being a footballer, especially a young footballer who's just breaking into a team and then finds himself getting injured. You know, that can be do or die sometimes. The timing of an injury is absolutely massive for a young player's career. If you've just found yourself getting into the team and then you get injured for a little bit, you might never get that opportunity again. So in fairness, obviously he was £35 million. Real were always going to have to try and give him another chance. Do you know what I'm saying? We then get a little bit more detail into his early life, how he always aspired to play for Flamengo. Some pictures of him as a kid. We're introduced to childhood friends, some family members. Shout out the aunties. I love them. They're great vibes. His aunt hates flying, apparently, which is not that helpful when you're related to a footballer, I guess. Those boats from Brazil to Champions League games are going to start taking the piss eventually. But faster than Florentino Perez could offer his Monzo card to a referee in La Liga, we were kind of back to him being a wonder kid in Madrid, all right? And, you know, he's starting to do a little bit here and there. He's starting to perform a little bit better. And this is the point where it becomes just really generic. I don't know if you've ever seen any documentary that revolves around any footballer that was ever at any stage a wonder kid, but this is that segment, all right? So he's made his debut for Flamengo. Things are really exciting. He gets his big money move. Things are bare emotional. He struggles at his new club. Then he starts doing better and he's being followed around the city that he lives in. He becomes the main man. Now he's got like a private chef. And I'm a big believer in like documentaries that really show me something. When it comes to like football related stuff, all right? Documentaries that show me stuff that I've either not seen before or that I wouldn't be able to predict. A lot of things have happened in Vini Jr.'s life already that do make this somewhat worthwhile. But when it came to like the stuff that wasn't to do with, you know, main social issues, there was nothing. It was just, if you made a documentary about Lamine Yamal tomorrow, it would follow the exact same path because that's all that's happened. You have gone from being a young player to being 24. From a footballing perspective, only a very certain amount of things can really have been achieved by that stage. Only a certain amount of stories can really be told that aren't public knowledge yet or that are mind-blowing. But in fairness, actually, maybe I'm being a bit too harsh. Not necessarily nothing was learned from this. I actually found the part where they talked to Karim Benzema quite interesting because obviously there was that drama where, you know, Vini was struggling kind of early days of his Real career, and Karim Benzema is filmed saying to, I think it's Balon down in the tunnel, don't pass to this guy, he's playing against us. Talking about Vini Jr. and the fact that he was having such a bad game that we just shouldn't even pass him the ball because he's quite literally a 12th man for the opposition. Now, I'm not gonna lie, that incident has brought about so many memes and tweets since then that have absolutely nothing to do with anybody involved. But I did always wonder how that mechanic and how that must have been for them after, how Vini Jr. was about that because he was still like 19 at the time. It gained a lot of traction, a lot of attention back then, but Karim kind of sat down and said that realistically it's just something that you say out on the pitch. It wasn't obviously intended to be picked up by, you know, tunnel cameras, but he was only saying it because he believes that Vini can do so much more than what he was performing and what he was showing during the course of that game. They talked about it after. It was absolutely fine. Maybe realistically journalists were blowing it out of proportion. Maybe some people just wanted their 15 minutes of fame. Probably shouldn't say the number 15 around Karim Benzema under the circumstances. We also around about this point got like a little like poke into the fact that Vini Jr. can be quite provocative sometimes. He has been known to get into beefs with players, and we're not talking about the Valencia stuff. That's separate and not his fault. But I'm talking about, you know, that little scuffle that he had with Joshua Kimmich, where everyone brought that up and said that's the reason you didn't win the Balon d'Or because he's not a very sportsman-like player. And it was, like, to be fair, it wasn't propaganda-ish in the sense that it had, like, Toni Kroos being like, we don't want to see him doing this. We want to see him actually playing, which is true. That is exactly how I feel about it. I don't have an issue with players being a little bit provocative and like shithousery. I made a video recently defending Miles Lewis-Skelly. I think that level of shithousery is absolutely fine. It's the same thing you'd expect from Jamie Vardy or Neil Maupay. But sometimes with Vini, it can be a little bit petty. It feels like he's scrapping everybody, and it's like, bro, sometimes focus on actually the game. You're talking to the fans like, Jude Bellingham's got 3 men around him right now. He needs your assistance. And he said during that he wasn't paid to be nice. And whilst I hear that, he isn't. He's not, you know, getting paid to be a liaison between Real Madrid and Celta Vigo. But at the same time, it is probably something that he needs to be a lot calmer with, as Carlo Ancelotti pointed out in the doc. It's not really spoken about much or really ever again after this point. But I think the fact that it's at least present is something. Obviously, it features a lot of talk from a lot of people around the club. Carlo Ancelotti gets plenty of interviews. Jude Bellingham takes a break from getting the guac got Guac 3000 from Trent Alexander-Arnold to feature as well, with perhaps the most annoying camera angle of all time. Why would he not be shifted over to the other side, to the dead spaces where his eyes are facing? At one point, I zoned out for a second, and then I came back, and Vini Jr was like topless in his bed, and R9, original Ronaldo, was stood over him. I usually skip that part, I'm not gonna lie, but it was interesting. They put bro in an LED sleeping bag at one stage to help with the flu. And another thing that I noticed was that he wears extremely short shorts. Maybe that was just the R9 segment, actually. I don't even know. There was then a bit of a touching, not from R9, about the national team and Vini Jr.'s adventures with Brazil. And obviously he's seen as a key man now for Brazil in a time where the national team isn't as strong as it has been, you know, in the days of R9, Ronaldinho, Cafu, Roberto Carlos. Incredible Brazilian footballers, and even really Neymar. There hasn't really been an influential Brazilian footballer since him, and at this point his knees are made of chocolate hobnobs. So really it's down to people like Vini, Rodrigo, and I guess Rafinha now to actually hold down the Brazilian national team. And that is a pressure that is highlighted a little bit as we talk about the World Cup of 2022. But honestly, I kind of thought this segment was a bit of a nothingness. Again, I don't really think it offered a crazy amount in terms of insight into his life or into how people perceive him for Brazil. Apart from like the happiness and the joy that he got for his first call-up, which was a lovely moment, don't get it twisted, it didn't really highlight how difficult things are for Brazil right now, for example. The Brazilian national team is not as strong as it was 20 years ago. That easily could have got a little segment on how he deals with that and how he deals with, in reality, being the main man. His goal scoring and goal contributions record is pretty poor for Brazil, and he hasn't really done anything for them. So truthfully, I thought this segment would be about 30 seconds long. Maybe it got chopped down a little bit when the documentary crew realised that half of Brazil's midfield plays for Wolves now, and they actually have to set foot in the city of Wolverhampton to get some interviews about it. One other thing that I wasn't too impressed by, that makes me sound like I'm a teacher at secondary school, like parents' evening. Your child, Vini Jr. Yeah, I'm sorry, Jose Maria. He just chats shit all the time, bro. I had to put him on report the other day. He's in detention for 4 days straight, bro. How do you even do? One thing, yeah, I wasn't massively, like, as keen on as well was how they dealt with, especially the first Champions League final. Like, this is massive, and this is the first time that Vini Jr. has reached the Champions League final where he's actually an imperative member of the squad. And I'm talking about the 2022 Champions League final here, where they obviously beat Liverpool. And not only did they beat Liverpool, he scored the goal in the final. This game, honestly, in terms of build-up and in terms of editing as he's scoring and the reaction and stuff after, was genuinely portrayed like it was a league match against Granada. There wasn't really any sort of grandiosity. That's definitely not a word. There wasn't any sort of, I don't know, emphasis on how much of a moment this actually must have been for him. I mean, I imagine, right? He must have been a bit gassed about scoring a winning Champions League goal. We got more about Thibaut Courtois being good in the final than we got about Vini Jr. scoring in it, and it's a Vini Jr. documentary. The Borussia Dortmund final was treated a little bit better. That felt like at least a little bit of a crescendo towards the end. There was actually, which I didn't even realize, was the fact that he was suffering with like a viral infection beforehand. So he's at like a dinner table, he's starting to feel really sick, he goes upstairs because he's feeling ill. It's just like a couple of days before the final, and so they have to like give him mad treatment basically to make sure that he's fit and that he's okay and he's feeling good, and he obviously scores in that final as well. That's like one thing I didn't know, and in fairness, again, it has a little bit more drama around it. It's edited to seem like an actual key moment in his career, at least. But I think the thing that this documentary did the best was really highlight some of the stuff that Vini has gone through from a racism perspective. And I didn't realize how early it started, to be honest with you. It was early doors. Like, there was a story from his friend about how they were driving around Spain, and because they were driving a nice car, they got stopped by the police with that age-old line of, this car's been involved in a crime that they never tell you about like 3 years ago, so we're just checking who's in here, which is always just a way of them stopping a car that has like young, ethnically diverse kids in, and then seeing if they've got anything on them or any reason to arrest them. And apparently that was happening a lot in Madrid. Obviously he was then getting called out for dancing, being told he was dancing like a monkey because of his celebrations and stuff. And this again was very early on. This was very much pre him being number 7 or being a main man at the club. But obviously the main, you know, talking point really really is the Valencia storyline, where he was involved in a horrific incident, basically, where he was racially abused at a Valencia game. Valencia fans, you know, I don't know how many of them, I think a small portion overall, but then started chanting monkey at him, to which he could be seen tearful, crying out on the pitch. He then got in an altercation with Valencia's goalkeeper. He was sent off for elbowing someone. Javier Tebas, the La Liga president, came out and said that he needed to get his facts straight after he had accused Spain of being a pretty racist country, which, I mean, again, I wouldn't say Spain is racismo as a whole, but there's a lot of racial incidents in Spain. They interviewed Neymar, Roberto Carlos, they talked about Samuel Eto'o getting racially abused as well. It definitely happens there and in Italy far more than it happens in other places across Europe. So that is something they have to talk about and they have to accept. And in fairness, they also, this is another thing I liked, they actually interviewed Javier Tebas, the president, who said that, and he obviously was like, oh, I didn't mean to say that, or for it to come across that way. Don't really know how it can come across any differently to how you said it, boss man, but whatever. And I thought that was treated with the care and the attention that it deserves, because I think that is the biggest thing that Vini Jr has been involved in his footballing career. You know, the press conference where he broke down in tears afterwards, it really made you emotional. It really made you feel for him. And, you know, I know that he's a very polarizing character in Spanish football. There is this wild take that he somehow deserves the abuse that he gets because he's provocative out on the pitch, which is, of course, mental and for deranged people only. Dancing in front of a group of fans, yeah, is not equatable to racism. Just want to put that one out there, just in case people didn't know. Going down a little bit too easily and winning your team a free kick doesn't equate to racism. Just, again, have to clarify, because there are somehow people that actually believe that. Valencia also banned Netflix's cameras from going to the stadium for the reverse fixture. So Netflix said, fuck you lot, and just used the La Liga footage anyway. And it's also interesting because Valencia said they're actually going to sue the Netflix team for digitally altering stuff. I think this is probably the first time that a football club has ever tried to sue somebody for something that was actually documented by video cameras. Either way, he bun Valencia. That's really the conclusion we can come to there. And as I said, I think the documentary did a really good job of showing the strength needed and the just general crazy levels of reaction there were to that story. So overall conclusions, it's not that bad, okay? It's obviously got a terrible rating because there's a lot of people that dislike Vini Jr in Spain. And a lot of those people do have a relatively reasonable reason. You know, I do think he is a little bit too emotional. There are times where he's unlikable. I didn't like that Kimmich clip where he's like just not taking the ball and he starts shouting in Kimmich's face as well as if he did something wrong in that situation. I personally don't mind Vini Jr. I've been accused of disliking him. I dislike Real Madrid. I just want to get that for sure. No, I'm joking. I don't have a dislike. I don't really have a strong opinion about Vini Jr, which I know is crazy because he is so polarizing, but I think he's an exceptional footballer who is definitely a bit too lippy sometimes, but has also got far too much abuse given what he's actually guilty of. And that is exactly the case here as well, summarized perfectly by the reaction that this documentary has got. It is overall not gonna change your life unless you are a big fan of Vini Jr or you're a big fan of Real Madrid, in which case you probably watched it already. It has some lovely people involved, including some of his teammates who are very praising and some family members who are just really sweet, as I said, like his aunties and his grandma. Overall, though, I do think maybe it's been made a bit too early. I think I get it, because whilst your stock's high and whilst these stories are relevant, you know, in 10 years from now, the Valencia racismo stuff might not be particularly relevant. He might not have been involved in racial abuse or a racism scandal up to that point, but I do think it probably just came a little bit too early. I don't think we need to be giving documentaries to 24-year-old footballers who are still in the early years, realistically, of their career. Like, I'd say the same if Lamine Yamal got a documentary at the age of 22. I don't need a Lamine Yamal documentary then. I need one at the end, you know, when he's actually one of the greats and when he's fully cemented himself into footballing folklore. It ends with Vini's now famous "I'll do it 10 times more" tweet in response to criticism, which I can only imagine means that we're going to get 10 more of these documentaries, in which case, so long. I won't be covering them. This documentary's alright. I'd give it like honestly, a 5 out of 10. It was an hour and a half long. It didn't waste that much of my time. I just don't think it needs to exist right now. I think it could happily exist in 5 years, feature a lot more, be a bit longer, have some cooler stories, and really teach you a lot more about Vini Jr, because half of it was surface level at best. If you've watched it though, what do you think? Drop it down below in the comment section. Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? I want to hear all of your thoughts down there. As I said at the start of the video, if you have enjoyed this one, please do feel free to slap the like button. It really does help me out more than you know. And subscribing, of course, as well, on the road to 750k subscribers. You can also follow me on social media. It is at @theofficialfng on Twitter, Insta, and on TikTok. But it's been a pleasure ranting at you guys today. Have a wonderful day, enjoy yourselves, and goodbye.